Now we have the NFC East. So we have the Kendall Wright, their first round pick, giving a real wide receiver to this Dallas Cowboys team, a player they desperately need, a position of need. Russell Wilson is their second round pick. I think that's an excellent choice for them. He very well could be their quarterback of the future unless they ruin him. But Dallas has had like Vince Young. They've had Tony Romo. Last year they were having between Tony Romo and Joe Webb. We'll see if Wilson's able to get the start this season, which I expect him to be the starter. James Michael Johnson, middle linebacker. Jerron McMillan at safety. Then in the later rounds, they have Brandon Mosley at offensive tackle, Tyrone Crawford at defensive end, Sean Spence, another defensive end, Malik Johnson, and then they have Greg Van Roten, their 7th round pick. They had the most picks in this draft. As for their depth chart, we see Russell Wilson will be starting. Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback as backup. Joe Webb. We see Adrian Peterson, their superstar running back, with Joseph Adai behind him. Dexter McCluster. Jason McGee at fullback. Now, they do have Greg Little from last year. He was, I believe, a 3rd-round pick or so. He was a real-life Browns player. That's how I know him. He dropped a lot, a lot of balls. Aldrick Robinson also in that same draft, a lot better rated. However, I am having Greg Little be the second receiver. Kenny Moore, Kyle Williams. Jason Witten still there. James Casey. Andrew Corliss. As for their O-line, they have a pretty average O-line. I mean, they have Dwayne Brown at left tackle. He's been their starter for quite a while. We see Max Gene Gills, A.Q. Shipley, then a little bit better, Manny Ramirez, and then Ben Ijalana at right tackle. As for their defense, they did pick up the best pass rusher in the league, the best defensive end in Calais Campbell, the 6'8" defensive end. They also have Charles Johnson on the opposite side of that pass rush. They did sign John Henderson, the veteran, for their interior nose tackle, with Terrell McLean, DeAnthony Smith also there. You see rookie Tyrone Crawford is behind Calais Campbell, and there's Malik Jackson as well. They do have Michael Okwo. Okwo was, I believe, with the Eagles for quite some time. Now he makes his way over to the Dallas Cowboys. They have Nick Barnett, who had spent many years with the St. Louis Rams in my franchise. Al Wilson, the veteran behind him. They do have Brian Orakpo, who's been a very good linebacker. I wish he was a higher overall, but he's been slowly progressing. Last year they had Jimmy Smith. They do have the old man Charles Tillman. I think he was one of their first draft picks a long time ago. You see Asher Allen, Will Blackman, Parrish Cox. Safeties are pretty solid. They got Eric Berry and they have Eric Weddle. We see rookie Jerron McMillan behind Weddle and Co Simpson behind Eric Berry. Special teams, they got Kenny Moore and Joseph Adai as mostly their return specialists. Billy Cundiff at kicker and Adam Podlosh at punter. This is a team that, I mean, with Russell Wilson starting, could very well be a solid playoff contender. The problem is all 3 of these NFC East teams could be playoff caliber teams, and we'll get to those coming up. But you have the NFC Championship game between the Commanders and the 49ers last year. The Eagles were 8-9 last year. Dallas was 7-10. And then you had the Giants with, I believe, 10 or 11 win season. All of these teams are playoff caliber, and Dallas is just getting the raw deal here. But let me know what you think of the Dallas Cowboys. Washington had Donta Hightower as their first pick on the 29th overall. They also bring in defensive tackle Derek Wolfe. Tight end Ladarius Green, probably one of the better tight ends in this draft class. Quarterback Austin Davis in the 5th round. You see punter Brian Anger, wide receiver Deontay Thompson, and then in the 7th round, a running back in Bryce Brown. As for their depth chart, they do have Michael Vick, but he got injured in preseason, so he is not there in the depth chart there. So Marcus Vick, his brother, who was a free agent acquisition after a couple seasons off, is going to be starting the first 2 games of the season. Mike Goodson, who in real life was drafted to the Panthers and never really got much of a start or not opportunity to play because he was behind D'Angelo Williams. He was behind Jonathan Stewart. But here in the Commanders franchise, he was drafted there, and he is an 80 overall. He's one of the best, one of the better running backs in the league. Maybe not one of the best, but definitely in the upper half. Chris Ivory is more of the power back, and then Darrell Scott, and they do have Bryce Brown, who 7th round pick, just kind of luckily making the team. Their receivers are Vincent Jackson and Darius Haywood-Bay. Haywood-Bay being a first-round pick a few years ago. Devon Best was a free agent acquisition they made this offseason. They have Jonathan Baldwin, who was a high pick a little bit ago. Deontay Thompson does make the roster, along with David Osbury, who probably could be a tight end too. I know Osbury was a big tight end. They do have Teo Johnson. Teo Johnson was with the Panthers. He was with the Browns. He's been kind of one of my reliable long-term tight ends. Has been kind of bouncing around the league a little bit, but having quite the career. We also have Joel Dreesen, Ladarius Green at tight end. As for their O-line, and there's some more to be desired here. James Martin at left tackle, Alex Boone, Uchi Nwaneri, Justin Smiley, the bright spot of this line, and then Eric Pears at right tackle. They do have Derek Sherrod as well, but Pears will get the start. Sherrod may get the start somewhere later down in his career. On defense, we have Ziggy Hood. We have Derek Morgan, a former first-round pick with Morgan. Sam Acho, also linebacker or defensive end. They have C.J. Mosley, who will be starting, and he was a free agent acquisition. They also have drafted Derek Wolfe, who's going to be the second defensive tackle, along with Jay Ross and Khalif Mitchell. As for linebackers, they have A.J. Hawk back from 2006. Dante Hightower they drafted. And you can see he's already going to be a huge boost for their middle linebacking core. Darrell Blackstock has kind of been like a consistent commander. I don't actually ever remember him playing in the NFL. I don't remember Blackstock at all, but he's made a solid contribution on this Marty Morningway Commanders. They do still have Antrell Roll, who apparently still in the 90s. He's 91. I think he's the 3rd best or 4th best cornerback in the league. They do have Sean Smith, Chris Cook, Chimdi Chikwa, and William Middleton. As for safeties, they have James Butler, and then Brodney Poole, who in the 2005 draft or 4 draft, I think it might have been 2004, the Browns drafted Sean Taylor, and then the Commanders drafted Brodney Poole. And we all know Sean Taylor died in real life, and I did kill him off as he was in real life. But we see the Commanders keeping Brodney Poole as kind of their long-term safety. Then special teams, they do have Jonathan Baldwin and Devon Bess as their return men, and then Nate Kading, Brian Anger as kicker and punter. So I believe the Commanders, with Michael Vick, there's no doubting where they can go. They are a high-performing team with Michael Vick, because how I kind of developed him is that with Atlanta, he didn't do very well, so he went to the Cardinals. Also did not do very well in the Cardinals, where he played well individually, but he got hurt a lot, he ran a lot, he didn't win. Then he went to jail, and when he came back, I had the bunch of teams kind of vie for him, and he ended up going to the Commanders, the Washington Redskins at the time. And from there, he had one season that was mediocre, but when Marty Morningway came in from the Eagles, I started to play Michael Vick more as a pocket quarterback and making good throws as opposed to just running all the time. And I started to see the transformation of Michael Vick and the Commanders with that type of strategy. Because when he was running all the time, he was getting hurt. We weren't making as much progress in the air. But when he started being that passing quarterback and then running when he had to, the Commanders became an elite team and almost making the Super Bowl this year. So let me know your thoughts on the Commanders. The Philadelphia Eagles start out with Stephon Gilmore with the 14th pick, Melvin Ingram as outside linebacker. They draft Case Keenum in the 3rd round, Alfred Morris, a running back in the 4th. They bring in Cole Beasley, who is unlikely to see the field. They also have Mike Remmers at left tackle, and then Charles Mitchell in the 7th round as a strong safety. When we look at their depth chart, they are still rocking with Donovan McNabb. He is coming off an MVP performance in the league, winning his first MVP in my franchise and his only in ever. He never had that in real life. They do have Thaddeus Lewis, who is the backup. Case Keenum probably was drafted a bit high there. I thought that Keenum might have been better than Lewis, but according to this draft class, apparently not. We have Frank Gore at running back. He's been there for a couple years, ever since the 49ers had Arian Foster. They had like a year where they were together, and then I traded Gore to the Eagles. They do have Morris as the backup, Stephon Johnson. Not a very solid backup running back core. It's basically Gore or bust. We see the wide receivers. Now, this is where it got interesting because I thought I was going to lose Ted Ginn because I re-signed Deshaun Jackson, but I didn't think I had the money to bring Ted Ginn Jr. back. But I was able to pull it off, and now we have Mark Mariani, Earl Bennett, and Cole Beasley as the backup wide receivers, and still have Heath Miller and John Phillips. I mean, more so Heath Miller at tight end. So there were some sacrifices made to keep this team going because they were in cap space hell. But I was able to keep the two speedsters because Ted Ginn has about 99 speed. Deshaun Jackson's like 97, 98. And Donovan McNabb does not take that for granted. We look at Marcus McNeil at left tackle, Reggie Wells, who they signed this offseason as left guard, Seth Olson, 71, Davin Joseph, Michael Ruse. Again, Michael Ruse over there at 88 overall right tackle. They've got a lot of protection there. Probably their center's the weakest, but what are you going to do? I mean, this team is so star-studded. You have to have some concessions. As for depth chart, they lost their Calais Campbell, left end, and they ended up signing Eric Walden, who I believe came over from the Raiders. They have Cameron Wake, Jarius Wynn. At DT, they had Corey Leggett, along with Al Woods, kind of in that center of their D-line. They do have KJ Wright, the former draft pick of theirs. Ray Malaluga, who's their centerpiece on defense. Melvin Ingram, their rookie, is going to be stepping right in, that second-round pick. For cornerback, they lost Lito Shepherd to the Chicago Bears. But they still have Stephon Gilmore, who they've drafted, John Bowie, Javier Arenas, Sterling Moore, but they did sign Leotis McKelvin from the Atlanta Falcons. And McKelvin comes from the Falcons, who were the number one or number two defense in the league. They've been solid. Such a strong team from the NFC South. And so losing Shepard, in some ways, they lost an older cornerback and picked up a younger cornerback at about maybe an even cheaper cost than what they would have had to pay for Shepard. And then their safeties are just as impressive. Earl Thomas III and Adrian Wilson. They have their youth and they've got their veteran, and just a dynamic team for the Philadelphia Eagles. And we wrap up with just the special teams where Cole Beasley, we may or may not keep him there, but Alfred Morris, Kareem Moore can also take kick returns. Randy Bullock is their kicker, along with Jason Baker. So again, I don't know why this team ever loses, but they do. But they are so star-studded. I expect a lot of things from them, and we'll see if they're able to actually pull off a Super Bowl. The Eagles were the only team in my franchise to go 16-0, and they did that in the very first year. We'll see if they're able to put together a winning season or a Super Bowl winning season this year. Then we have the New York Giants. They went with Brian Quick as a wide receiver in the first round. They definitely needed some wide receiver help. They also brought in Bill Bentley at cornerback, Tavon Wilson, free safety in the third round, Mike Martin as defensive tackle. Then they bring in another guard, Senio Clemente, Keith Tandy, and Cyrus Gray at halfback. When we look at their depth chart, they are still rocking with veteran Carson Palmer. Palmer has been very solid for them. They have Jonathan Crompton and Eric Ainge as backups. We see Ryan Matthews, their star running back. I think he was Rookie of the Year, or at least he was Offensive Rookie of the Year. We see Tywan Jones. We see Jarris Norwood behind him. Michael Bush is a solid fullback, and I have used Michael Bush in single back formation as the main power back. The star receiver for the Giants is Devin Aromashodu, who was a star receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. Of course, he was behind people like Reggie Wayne and so forth, but he gets to be the star here. But he's not the best star. That's why drafting Brian Quick was important. quick. I don't think he's going to be the man or the guy, but in the first round, the Giants do think he's going to be that. Niles Paul, who I believe is in his sophomore season, he's going to be likely a good role player here as a third-string receiver. Sidney Rice, the veteran, along with two other, Terrace Johnson and Stephen Burton. As for tight end, they have Jimmy Graham, and they signed Gary Barnidge from Cleveland. And then they had Lee Smith that's kind of the filling up their roster. Eugene Monroe, their big man left tackle, being backed up by Doug Free. They do have Leroy Harris, Jeremy Newberry, Chad Reinhardt, Marcus Gilbert on the line. Chad Reinhardt was a free agent acquisition as well. And Jeremy Newberry was also a free agent signing. So they were able to pick up 2 offensive linemen in this free agency class, really helping them kind of shore up that middle interior line, hopefully to help Ryan Matthews. On defense, they are also a pretty solid team. They've got Chris Canty and Adrian Claiborne as pass rushers. We see Amobi Okoye and Glenn Dorsey, 2 really good defensive tackles. They do bring in Amobi Okoye in free agency, so we have Glenn Dorsey and Okoye right there in the middle. That helps them against what is a very difficult division. Paul Posluszny is their star linebacker, with Zach Dials in the middle, Kawika Mitchell also in the middle, Wesley Woodyard as the outside linebacker on the right. Cornerbacks, they do have old man Charles Woodson, who I may have to consider moving to safety at some point because he is getting old. But Chris Gamble's their star. You have Bradley Fletcher, who can take on that second spot if Woodson goes. Bill Bentley, Keith Tandy. But safeties, they're looking at Morgan Burnett, Tavon Wilson as free safety, and then DeJuan Landry and Chip Vaughn at strong safety. So they're pretty solid safeties. I mean, yes, you want 80s, but that is a very workable defense. As for their return, they have Tarish Johnson, Brian Quick as options there, Sebastian Janikowski at kicker, and Matt Allen at punter. Giants are a consistent wild card team. They could very well win the division as well. I mean, right now, every single one of these teams have a chance to make it big, and I think the Jim Caldwell Giants could just do that.